then when we talk about governance, let's kind of move away from governments, but let's talk about corporations, particularly companies like Google, Facebook, let's say Baidu. They own gargantuan amount of our data, and I view my data as my personal property. And they have been monetizing this data for decades, and how they created this whole consensual process, these sort of opt-in, opt-out kind of the page, and I rarely read them, and I just click because I want to get to next sort of application, and they essentially steal my data and monetize, and I do get free email, free lots of applications, but nonetheless, we're now at a point where these companies are controlling our data, and there's a big issue out there, and it is becoming political issue. So regarding this data security, data ownership, any views or perspective here?
I'm not a traditional AI person. I look at this data. I read an article that said if you took all of the privacy rules and printed them out, the notices, it would be the size of a U.S. football field. And who's going to read that? I think that people make a choice, and I do believe in individual choice. I think maybe we have to educate people more about the choices they're making about their data. I think you're right. I think maybe somebody said it earlier today, maybe we can monetize our own data somehow. From an international space law perspective, we're looking at corporations that are going to be creating settlements on the moon to asteroids, to mine things. They're going to create their own civilizations like the British East India Company. I mean, we're looking at a time where between the data and the fact that these corporations are going to be able to go to physical places where government can't reach them, it's really concerning to me. It doesn't help answer anything, but it's my concern.
What Plato said is, he said that every society that has a huge body of law, it's an unjust and unfair society. So having said that, I don't want to ask who to raise hands if you guys ever read any of those terms and agreements that you clicked, you scrolled down, because I did not. I didn't have the time. It's very scary because this data belongs to me and I need to be able to have control of my life, but that's where we're losing control. And I do feel that blockchain identity, which can be cryptographically, Sergey can speak more, secured, it will be able to do that for me. But we're far away from there. And making a point to what was said earlier, that do not trust governments, and we're not over here anarchists or conspiracy theorists. History is out there for the last 3,000 years. Of Illumination is a very good book called The Curse of Money by Kenneth Rogoff. Big monetary policy in the United States, recent, a year and a half, 2 years ago, that he disclaims that digital currencies are not good, like blockchains are not good, but he advocates the idea of a government-issued digital currency. So in a little bit, the government and all the corporations, they gotta know whether I like dark chocolate or white chocolate and what I do with my money. So for me, that's very scary to hear.
Well, I guess I'll talk, on the technical part of this. So from a technical perspective, like it was pointed out, you can use a blockchain to create identity management services where a user that has some data that he wants to share could have an identity and could have sort of selective disclosure mechanism, right? Where if I want to share data with a particular company, then I have a right and I have, moreover, a technical mechanism to do that. And there are all kinds of sort of interesting cryptographic methods where not only I can sort of share the data, but I can allow somebody to even compute on my data without seeing my data. And so I think that's why I'm excited about this. I think a blockchain is a way of sort of enlarging our scope of tools, specifically on the technical side, where I am in more control of what happens with my data as a person.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited about the technology improvements and research that's going into things like homomorphic encryption, learning on encrypted data, learning on a federated basis. These are the things that I think are a good counter to the current system of centralized ML. I also think that, for the most part, the horse is out of the barn, right? People complain about not owning their data and privacy and security, but no one really does anything about it. And
Oh, that is not true. That is not true.
have you?
I mean, look at how the Cambridge Analytica, it just imploded.
Agreed. I'm talking about the average consumer, right? The average person is still using Google. The average person is still on Facebook. Yes, numbers are starting to taper off, but I view that as more of a function of a saturated market than people saying, I don't want to use this because of privacy concerns or data ownership concerns. And so until consumer behaviors and sentiment changes, I don't think technology is going to solve it. As much as I would like to see technology solving this problem, I think it's a consumer behavior problem as well.
I'm going to start with an observation. So I was working in the ministry, the Ontario Ministry of Education at the time, around 2010, when I think there was an inflection point of going into Google Drive and those Google services, especially in schools. Google and Microsoft are the two big ones for the cloud services, which are free for education. So, and I was sitting more on, as a tech expert, more like on the GDPR kind of position, but data. And really what struck me is a couple of things. I mean, free helps, but also the ease of use and the UX really won a lot of people, which thought like it was so easy. And actually, I'm guilty myself. I put a lot of things up there because it's so easy to use. So as a lessons learned, I think if solutions need to be put out there to compete, it needs to be really, really well designed to be easier, or at least as easy. What we're doing at Consensus, there is a number of projects going on. There is one called Uport, and we're also part of Decentralized Identity Foundation with Microsoft and other groups where we cooperate into digital identity and how do we deal with that. There is also a working group at the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance we're part of. So the vision is to flip the model, and instead of putting all our single data into a data center, what if everybody could keep their own data and decide what they want to share? So that becomes interesting because you don't have to share everything. You can share pieces of data. So let's say you go to a bar. What would you have to give your driver license where people can see where you live, what's your birthday, and then try to track you down on Facebook and try your password or recover things because they know a piece about you, like your postal code, your birth date, and a lot of these things. Well, with blockchain, you can stake a claim out there, say, I'm older than 21 years old. You can go to government that basically put some kind of a stamp on it, say that's true. And when you go to a bar, the people will only see, okay, government says, yeah, he's older than 21 years old. So this approach to granular identity where we keep control, that's kind of the future. And there are, the encryption is getting better, the way also we handle our logins. Let's talk about logins. When we log into Facebook or we log in here and there, people can track you if you log in with the same email address, right? At the end of the day, people see, okay, you're banking here, you're shopping there, you also have loyalty points to that other thing. So what we're trying to do is to splice your identity so when you touch the blockchain or any digital service, you touch it with the different kind of footprint or fingerprint. So people can see you interacting, but they cannot cross-reference where you are, what you've done.
Okay, so we got roughly about 1 minute, and I have a personally burning question that I wanted to ask you, but I don't think we have enough time to get answers from everybody, so maybe I'll take answers from two of you. But I am a huge fan of DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And when I read white paper for, let's say, SingularityNet or any other, let's say, decentralized AI projects out there, the essence of these, let's say, marketplace is really DAO. It's the reward structure. It's the governance structure. It's how to incentivize each node to do good things for the entire ecosystem. But at the same time, when I look at the current state of blockchain, it's just not going to happen because it doesn't have enough juice to it. The transaction speed is not fast enough. The security is still an issue. So my question to you is that when will we actually see this ultimate DAO, the romantic DAO actually happens and that could potentially replace some kind of central authority where everything becomes distributed? When will that happen? Is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 6 months from now? Anybody?
Well, I mean, so I agree with you that Bitcoin and Ethereum has a lot of problems, right, on the technical level, and I think a lot of these problems have already been solved at like Algorand, for example. I think technically we have very high throughput and we can process a lot of transactions. But the other thing to that is that the next step of things to do is to set up the incentive schemas correctly, right? So Bitcoin is a type of a system where the incentives were not set up correctly. That created a lot of mining pools and concentrated all of the power. So I think the right thing to do is to make sure that from the designs or mathematically, you can actually prove that you have an incentive schemas that is set up correctly that encourages and kind of fulfills this decentralization promise. And I think that's actually going to happen pretty soon, hopefully in the next few years.
2 years.
Well, I won't give an exact number. I'll give a range.
Okay.
2 to 5.
Like 2 to 3 years, would you say?
2 to 5, I would say, yeah.
Okay, 2 to 5. Okay.
Okay, you need 2 computer scientists to answer this question. We dominate it here. I don't have a crystal ball to say 1, 2, or 3 years. Definitely we're transitioning and there will be a next generation of blockchain. And I'm not a proof of mining kind of fan as a person unless we want to melt this planet down in terms of the environmental problems that they express. But Susan at the panel before, she spoke very wisely about behavioral game theory economics. Let me call them behavioral crypto economics. And that's an area that has to evolve and allow everybody with your own cell phone to be able to run a blockchain depending on the stake that you have. But in my view, closing is that the DAO is the epitome of Frederick Hayek's denationalization of money, that he has all these free floating currencies around competing in a pretty much a behavioral system. The DAO takes the level even further by allowing smart contracts to run and compete with each other. And I would like to believe the next 3 to 5 years that will be determining towards the vision that you have.
3 to 5
technologically
years.
wise.
For real, 3 to 5 years.
Pardon me?
3 to 5 years.
Yeah, he looks at the product, I'm looking at it a little bit more, things will evolve, but it will be soon, provided the regulatory hurdles, because we're going to have a lot of those to deal with.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.